I could hear the beeping of the hospital monitor, steady, almost mocking, as if it had no idea how quickly my entire world was unraveling. My palms were slick with sweat against the metal rail of the hospital bed. I tried to focus on my breathing, but every inhale felt too shallow, too fragile, like I might not have many more left if I didn't get help. "Miss Carter," the surgeon had said, voice clipped but urgent. "We need to operate immediately. The cyst is larger than we thought. Waiting even another day puts you at serious risk. Immediately." That word echoed in my head like a gunshot, and so I did what anyone would do. I reached for the phone. I dialed my mother first, praying that this time, maybe this time, she'd hear the fear in my voice and rise to the occasion. "Mom," I whispered, my throat raw. "They have to do surgery today. I need you to watch Ethan for a few hours, please." There was a pause. Then the faint shuffle of background noise. Laughter. Music. My mother's voice finally came through, sharp and impatient. "Elena, we've already packed for Leah's engagement trip. We're driving to Seattle tonight. You can't call us with this nonsense now." "Nonsense." "Mom, it's not nonsense," I said, trying to steady my voice, but it cracked anyway. "This isn't optional. The doctors—" "You're always so dramatic," she cut me off, that familiar cold dismissal stabbing straight into my chest. Then my father's voice joined from the background, gruff and annoyed. "Can't she find someone else? We've had these plans for months." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, as if proximity might force them to listen. "There is no one else. I don't have anyone else. Please, just a few hours with Ethan. I'll owe you." My mother scoffed. "You already owe us enough. Honestly, Elena, maybe you should have thought about this before having a child without a husband. You always make everything harder than it has to be." The words hit me harder than the diagnosis ever could. I had expected hesitation, maybe guilt. I hadn't expected cruelty, silence stretched between us. My father muttered something about me, always choosing the worst moments to create problems. And then they hung up. That was it. Not even a goodbye. I sat there, staring at the sterile white wall of the hospital room, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the line went dead. A numbness spread through me. I'd spent years giving them everything. My money, my time, my peace of mind. Paying off their mortgage when foreclosure loomed, covering Leah's credit card debt, buying groceries when they were too tight that month. And now, when I needed them just once, they chose a party. The monitor beeped again. I counted the rhythm to stop myself from breaking down. Ethan, my son, 7 years old with eyes that sparkled even on his worst days. He was waiting at home with the babysitter I couldn't afford to extend another night. If I went into surgery without a plan, he'd be alone before I even woke up. My hands trembled as I dialed number after number. Friends, colleagues, even old acquaintances. Voicemails, excuses, polite refusals. Nobody could drop everything in the middle of the day. Nobody except... I swallowed hard, thinking of Mrs. Green, my neighbor. 72 years old, frail but warm-hearted. She'd been kind to Ethan, slipping him cookies, teaching him how to water her plants. She wasn't family, but she'd always asked about us more than my parents ever did. I dialed her number with shaking hands. "Elena?" she answered, breathless, like she'd hurried to the phone. The moment I explained, she didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetheart. Bring Ethan over. He'll be safe with me. Don't you worry about a thing." Relief hit me so hard, I nearly cried into the receiver. But relief was quickly followed by another feeling. Shame. Why was a neighbor, a woman who owed me nothing, willing to stand up for me when my own parents refused? Why was kindness easier to find from strangers than from the people who raised me? When the nurse wheeled me toward the operating room, I glanced one last time at the phone on the bedside table. A small, irrational part of me still hoped it would buzz with a message, a text, even a half-hearted, "good luck." It didn't. The anesthesia pulled me under, heavy and merciful. But when I woke up, the pain was worse than I imagined. Not the sharp ache in my abdomen, but the hollow cavern in my chest. The surgery was a success. I was alive, but I'd never felt more abandoned. The first thing I did was reach for my phone. The screen lit up with notifications. 3 missed calls, 5 messages. For a split second, hope flickered. Maybe they'd change their minds. Maybe my parents regretted everything. But no, every message was from Leah. Selfies in a sparkling dress, a boomerang of champagne glasses clinking, a video of my parents laughing on the dance floor, my mother's voice in the background. Elena will be fine. She always is. Something inside me cracked. I closed the phone, holding it against my chest, as if pressing it there would contain the storm building inside me. That night, lying in the hospital bed, I replayed years of memories, the time I emptied my savings to stop their foreclosure, and my father didn't even say thank you. The Christmas I bought Leah a new laptop so she could finish college, only for her to drop out 2 months later. The birthdays they forgot, the promotions they ignored, the way they told everyone. Elena always lands on her feet, like my sacrifices were nothing but luck. All of it led here. My mother choosing a party over my surgery wasn't a new betrayal. It was just the loudest one. The next morning, Mrs. Green arrived with Ethan. My little boy ran into the room, his arms flung around me, his cheeks warm and sticky with the remnants of cookies. "Mommy, I missed you," he whispered. I clutched him to me, tears finally breaking free. "I missed you too, baby." "So much." Mrs. Green smiled gently from the doorway. "He was an angel. Don't you worry. You just focus on healing now." As she left, I felt a wave of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude that she had saved me from disaster. Guilt that I'd wasted so many years believing I owed loyalty to people who couldn't even show up when it mattered. The hospital discharged me the following afternoon. On the drive home, Ethan chattered about cartoons and cookies, blissfully unaware of the storm inside me. But when we reached the apartment, and I set him up with his toys, I finally opened my laptop. My hands hovered over the keyboard, heart pounding. I canceled the automatic $600 transfer I'd been sending my parents for the last 5 years. Deleted their credit card from my grocery delivery account, blocked their numbers. With every click, a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration coursed through me. For the first time, I was choosing myself. For the first time, I was free, or so I thought. 3 days later, as I sat at the kitchen table balancing Ethan's school forms, a sharp knock rattled my apartment door. Not the gentle tap of Mrs. Green, not the polite knock of a neighbor. This was urgent, angry. I froze, every muscle in my body tightening. Through the peephole, I saw Leah standing there. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her hair messy, her phone clutched in one trembling hand. "Elena," she called, her voice desperate. "Please open the door. Something terrible's happened. We need to talk." Ethan looked up from his toys, wide-eyed. "Mommy, who is it?" I pressed a finger to my lips, my heart pounding. Leah banged again, harder this time. "Elena, I know you're in there. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Please, Dad lost his job. They might lose the house. You can't ignore us right now." The words slammed into me like a car crash. They hadn't checked on me after surgery. They hadn't called, hadn't cared. And now that their world was crumbling, they came pounding on my door. I stared at the door, at the faint shadow of my sister on the other side. My hand trembled on the lock. Part of me wanted to open it, to help, to fall back into the role I'd always played. But another part whispered, "This is how it begins again. Don't let them pull you back in." I took a step back from the door. And in that moment, I realized my surgery hadn't just removed something dangerous from my body. It had revealed the cancer that had been growing in my family for years. And this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to treat it. Leah's voice on the other side of the door clawed at me like nails on glass. "Elena, please. You don't understand. Everything's falling apart. Dad's been fired, Mom's panicking. If we lose the house, it's over. We need you." Her words seeped under the crack like smoke, suffocating, familiar. I stood frozen in the kitchen, Ethan peering up at me with wide, questioning eyes. My heart pounded in my ears, echoing against the silence inside my apartment. For years, this was my role. Fixer, provider, the dependable one. The family bank account with a beating heart. The voice in my head whispered the same old refrain. If you don't help, no one will. They'll collapse without you. But another voice, stronger now, hissed back. And where were they when you collapsed? I backed away from the door, my breath ragged. Not this time, I murmured under my breath, though I wasn't sure if I was talking to Leah or myself. The knocking stopped abruptly. Silence hung heavy. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd left. Then her voice cracked, small and trembling. You're really not going to open the door? After everything you've done for us before? I pressed my palms against the countertop, trying to ground myself. Exactly, I whispered. Her sobs drifted through the door. Then the sound of retreating footsteps. I sank into a chair, my body trembling. Ethan crawled onto my lap, his little arms wrapping around me. Mommy, he whispered. Why is Auntie crying? I swallowed hard. How could I explain the complexity of blood that cut deeper than knives? Sometimes, I said softly, people cry because of choices they've made. It doesn't mean we have to fix everything. But the storm wasn't over. 2 days later, an envelope appeared under my door. No knock this time, just silence. I spotted it when I went to get the mail, the corner peeking from beneath the rug. Inside, a letter written in my father's stiff, formal handwriting. Elena, I know you're angry, but this is bigger than a fight. I've lost my job. The bills are piling up. Your mother is barely holding it together. We need $10,000 to keep the house. You've always been the strong one. Don't turn your back on your family now. Without you, we'll lose everything. My stomach twisted. $10,000. As if I had that kind of money lying around. As if my son's future wasn't worth protecting, too. I crumpled the paper in my fist, fighting the urge to scream. How dare they frame this as my responsibility, as if their recklessness, their decades of choices were mine to pay for. But then, guilt crept in. 10,000. That house was where I'd grown up. The cracked porch steps, the lilac bush Mom planted by the mailbox, the squeaky floorboard outside my old room. They weren't just walls. They were memories. Did I have the right to let it all crumble? That night, sleep evaded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the house, empty, boarded, abandoned. And behind it, I saw Ethan's face, years from now, asking why I let my parents lose everything. The next morning, I decided I had to see for myself. I told Ethan we were going on a little trip, packed his backpack, and drove across town. The house loomed at the end of the cul-de-sac, its paint peeling worse than I remembered, the front lawn overgrown. It looked less like the place I grew up, more like a ghost of it. Leah's car was in the driveway. My parents' blinds were drawn tight. I stood on the sidewalk, my chest tightening. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but Ethan tugged at my sleeve. Mommy, is this where Grandma lives? I nodded, though the words stuck like glass in my throat. Yeah, baby. This is it. I rang the bell. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door creaked open, and my mother stood there. Her once perfect hair was unbrushed, her lipstick smudged, her eyes hollow. Elena, she breathed, relief washing over her face. Thank God, I knew you'd come. She reached for me, but I stepped back. The years of coldness, of dismissal, hung between us like barbed wire. I just came to see, I said, my voice firm, though inside I was shaking. She glanced down at Ethan, forcing a smile. Oh, sweetheart, look how big you've gotten. Ethan clutched my hand tighter, half hiding behind me. He didn't remember her well enough to step forward. My father appeared in the hallway, shoulders slumped, his once proud frame diminished. He looked at me not with love, but with expectation. You got our letter, he said, not a question. A statement. Yes, I replied. He sighed heavily. Then you know we don't have time. We're drowning. We just need this one favor, Elena. One last time. The phrase struck me like lightning. One last time. How many times had I heard that before? The foreclosure, Leah's tuition, Mom's medical bills, Dad's credit card debt. Always one last time. Always me. I took a step forward, my voice trembling. When I was on that hospital bed, waiting for surgery, do you know what I needed? Just one favor. For you to show up. And you didn't. Mom flinched. Dad's jaw tightened. Elena, we didn't think it was that serious. Mom said quickly, defensive. You always exaggerate. You've always been so... Dramatic. Dramatic? My voice rose, sharp, raw. I was facing life or death, and you went to a party. And now you expect me to save you? Silence fell like a guillotine. Leah finally appeared, hovering at the top of the stairs. Her face was streaked with tears, her mascara smeared. "Please, Elena, don't do this. We'll lose everything." I looked up at her, my chest heaving. "I already lost everything. I lost you. All of you. That house is just wood and paint. It's not family. Family doesn't walk away when you need them." My father's face hardened, pride and bitterness twisting his features. "So you're just going to abandon us? After everything we've given you?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Everything you've given me? You mean the trauma, the debt, the guilt you've hung around my neck since I was old enough to work? You didn't give me anything. I gave, and I'm done." Ethan tugged my hand again, whispering, "Mommy, can we go home?" That was it. The final nail, my son, my anchor, reminding me where my true home was. I turned without another word, leading him back to the car. My mother's voice cracked behind me, pleading, begging, calling my name, but I didn't look back. The drive home was quiet. Ethan leaned against his booster seat, humming softly. While my hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, I expected to feel relief, triumph, freedom. Instead, what came was dread, because deep down, I knew my family wasn't finished, and I was right. That night, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Unknown numbers, voicemails, messages from Leah, frantic and manipulative. "You don't understand, Elena. They're desperate. You're being cruel. You'll regret this. If you don't help, it'll be your fault when everything falls apart." I silenced the phone, but their words burned through me anyway. Later, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at me, sleepy-eyed. "Mommy, are you okay?" I kissed his forehead, forcing a smile. "I'm okay, baby. Better than okay. We're safe. That's what matters." But as I lay awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, one thought haunted me. They wouldn't stop knocking. Not until they took everything, or until I found the strength to shut the door for good. And just when I thought I'd braced myself for anything. The next morning, I opened the door to find a thick envelope on my welcome mat. Inside wasn't a plea this time. It was something far worse. A legal notice. My parents had listed me as a guarantor on their second mortgage years ago, without my knowledge. And now, the bank was coming for me. My parents hadn't just begged me for money. They had shackled me to their debt without ever asking. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in, the air pressing against my chest. I sank into a chair. The legal notice spread across the table, my pulse hammering in my ears. How? When? And then I remembered. Years ago, when I'd still been young and desperate for their approval, my father had shoved a stack of routine documents in front of me. "Just sign, Elena," he'd said. "It's nothing, just some bank forms." I had signed, blindly, trusting, and now I was responsible for nearly $50,000. A bitter laugh bubbled out of me, sharp and broken. My whole life I'd carried their burdens, but this was beyond cruel. This was calculated. I looked across the room at Ethan, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, building Lego towers with complete concentration. His small voice carried, "Mommy, look, the spaceship is almost done." I forced a smile, but inside, rage clawed through me like wildfire. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. If I gave in, if I caved under their debt, my son's future would be destroyed. No, not again. The next day, I drove to the bank. The sterile smell of paper and ink hit me as I sat across from the loan officer, the notice trembling in my hands. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I never agreed to this mortgage." The officer adjusted his glasses, tapping at the computer. "According to our records, you signed as a guarantor. Your signature is right here." He slid the paper across the desk, and there it was. My name, my handwriting, my signature. I stared at it, bile rising in my throat. "They tricked me," I whispered. "I thought it was routine paperwork. I didn't know what I was signing." The officer's expression softened, but his voice stayed firm. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, but legally you're bound. If the payments aren't made, you're responsible." I walked out of that office numb, the weight of $50,000 pressing down like chains. That night, the phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Leah's voice rushed through the line, panicked. "Elena, thank God. We were so scared you wouldn't call back." "Scared?" My voice shook with fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You tied me to your mortgage, without my consent." Silence. Then Leah's whisper. "Dad said you knew." Dad lied. I could hear muffled voices in the background. My mother's high-pitched sobs, my father's booming anger. "Elena," Leah said finally, her voice breaking, "we're desperate. If we lose the house, Mom says she can't go on. Please, just help us this once." That phrase again, this once. Something inside me snapped. "No," I said, my voice like ice. "Not this time. Not ever again. You made this mess. You live with it." Before she could respond, I hung up, but the storm didn't end. 2 days later, I returned home from work to find my apartment door ajar. My chest tightened as I pushed it open. Ethan sat on the couch, wide-eyed, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, and there, sitting across from him, were my parents. My blood turned to fire. "How did you get in here?" I demanded. My father leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "Leah gave us the spare key. We needed to talk." I slammed the door shut behind me. "You had no right." "We're your family," my mother interrupted, her voice trembling. "We don't need permission to see you." "Permission?" My laugh was sharp. "You abandoned me in a hospital bed and now you break into my home?" "That's not family." Ethan clung tighter to his toy, sensing the tension. My father stood, his voice booming. "Enough of this. You've always thought you were better than us, smarter. But without us, you'd have nothing. We raised you, and you owe us." The words cut deep, but I refused to let them see me bleed. "I don't owe you," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "Not anymore. You took enough from me, my money, my trust, my peace. But you don't get my son, and you don't get another cent." For a moment, silence. Then my mother crumpled into the chair, sobbing. My father's face hardened, rage simmering in his eyes. "You'll regret this, Elena," he spat. And then they left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. That night, I held Ethan close, my mind racing. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival. They had crossed a line, and I couldn't let them near my son again. I called a lawyer the next morning, told her everything. The forged mortgage, the manipulation, the unannounced visits. She listened quietly, then said the words I'd been afraid to admit out loud. "You may need to consider a restraining order." The weeks that followed blurred into a storm of court dates, paperwork, and sleepless nights. My parents fought viciously, denying everything, painting me as the ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned them in their time of need. But for every lie they spun, I had the truth. The bank documents, the hospital records, the years of receipts showing where my money had gone. It wasn't easy. Some days I wanted to give in, to write the check, to make it all go away. But then I'd look at Ethan, his wide, innocent eyes, his trust in me, and I knew. Giving in meant teaching him it was okay to let people bleed you dry. I couldn't let that be his lesson. The final hearing was brutal. My parents sat across the courtroom, their eyes burning holes through me. Leah wept silently beside them. My lawyer laid everything bare, the manipulation, the financial abuse, the forged paperwork. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my legs trembling. "All my life," I began, my voice low but steady. I believed family meant sacrifice. I gave everything I had, money, time, love, because I thought that's what daughters are supposed to do. But family isn't supposed to destroy you. Family isn't supposed to abandon you when you need them most. I'm not just fighting for myself today. I'm fighting for my son, because he deserves to grow up knowing love isn't about control or manipulation. It's about showing up when it matters. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, but a strange calm settled over me. The judge ruled in my favor. The forged guarantor claim was voided. The restraining order was granted. For the first time in my life, I was free. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. No more late-night calls. No more guilt-laden messages. No more surprise knocks at my door. At first, the silence felt strange, empty. But slowly, It became peace. I poured my energy into Ethan. We built Lego towers taller than him, baked cookies that came out half-burned but delicious, planted flowers on our tiny balcony, and for the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next demand. One evening, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at me, his eyes curious. "Mommy," he asked, "are Grandma and Grandpa coming back?" I paused, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "No, baby," I said softly. "They're not. But that's okay, because we have each other. And sometimes, family isn't the people you're born to. It's the people who stay." He smiled sleepily, nestling into his blanket. "Like you and me?" Tears burned my eyes as I kissed his forehead. "Exactly. You and me. Always." And in that moment, I realized something. The surgery had saved my life, but walking away from my family's chains, that had saved my soul. For the first time, my story wasn't about survival. It was about freedom. For a few weeks after the courtroom victory, life felt almost normal. Too normal. The silence was strange, like the calm before a storm. I went to work, picked up Ethan from daycare, cooked dinners, and tried to convince myself that I was free. But freedom is fragile when your enemies still breathe, and my parents were nothing if not persistent. The first crack came on a Tuesday morning. I logged into my work computer, only to find my access locked. A red warning flashed across the screen. Unauthorized activity detected. My stomach dropped. The IT department called me into a meeting. "Elena," my boss said carefully, "we've received reports of fraudulent activity linked to your accounts. Expense reports. Client files altered. Emails sent under your name." I froze. "That's impossible." Then I remembered. My father, my sister, the documents, the forged signature. Someone was sabotaging me. I spent that afternoon in HR, defending myself, pulling every piece of proof I could gather. My phone buzzed with an anonymous text just as I left the office. "You thought you could walk away? Think again." My hands shook as I deleted it, but inside I felt a fire spark. They wanted a war. They had one. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and pen. For years I had been their victim, their scapegoat, their provider, but not anymore. If they wanted to play dirty, I would play smarter. And this time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was going on the attack. Step 1 was digging into their lives. I started with Leah. She had always been reckless, sloppy. And sure enough, within days, I found threads unraveling. Unpaid credit card bills, late rent notices, whispers of gambling debts. Then my parents. My father, the self-proclaimed provider, had been living off payday loans, robbing Peter to pay Paul. My mother had maxed out 3 store credit cards in my name years ago. Cards I'd closed but never forgotten. Their lives weren't just crumbling. They were rotting from the inside out, and I would expose every crack. But life had other plans. One Friday evening, as Ethan and I walked home from the park, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street from my apartment. Engine running, windows tinted. The next morning it was there again. By the 3rd day, I knew they were watching me. I filed a police report, but the officer only shrugged. "Unless they make direct threats or step on your property, there's not much we can do." That night, fear pressed against me like a weight. But then I looked at Ethan, asleep in his bed, his little hand clutching his dinosaur toy, and I knew fear wasn't an option. So I called an old friend, Maya. We'd gone to college together, drifted apart when life swallowed us whole. But Maya had taken a different path, into investigative journalism, the kind that dug up dirty truths people wanted buried. When I told her everything, she didn't flinch. "Elena," she said, "if they're sabotaging you, if they're stalking you, then they're desperate. And desperate people leave evidence. Let's find it." And so the adventure began. We spent nights poring over public records, tracing bank accounts, following digital trails. Maya taught me tricks, how to search property databases, how to read court filings, how to track phone numbers back to burner accounts, and what we found was worse than I imagined. My parents weren't just broke. They were drowning. Years of hidden loans, defaulted payments, shady business deals that smelled like scams. But the real bombshell was Leah. She wasn't just in debt. She was being investigated for fraud, and she'd been using my name as an alias. The pieces clicked together like a horrifying puzzle. The forged mortgage, the fake emails at work, the harassment. They weren't just trying to drag me back into their control. They were trying to sink me with them, and if I didn't act fast, they'd succeed. Maya leaned back from her laptop, eyes wide. Elena, if this goes public, it won't just ruin them. It'll protect you. But once you do this, there's no turning back. They'll know it came from you. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Years of betrayal pressed against me like a tidal wave. No turning back, I whispered. Good. The next days blurred into motion. Maya drafted an exposé, detailing every scam, every fraudulent document, every debt. I gathered my own evidence. Bank statements, messages, legal records. It was meticulous, ruthless. And when the story went live, it detonated like a bomb. The fallout was immediate. My father's so-called business collapsed overnight. Creditors swarmed. My mother's social circle, the neighbors she'd always bragged to, turned on her like vultures. And Leah, she was arrested within a week. Her fraud charges no longer whispers but headlines. The black sedan disappeared. The calls stopped. For the first time, I felt the power shift, but power has consequences. 2 weeks later, as I left the office one evening, a figure stepped from the shadows of the parking garage. It was my father. His face was gaunt, eyes wild. "You ruined us," he hissed. I froze, keys clenched in my fist. "You ruined yourselves." He took a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You think this is over? You think you've won? We're your blood, Elena. You can't cut us out. We'll always come back." For a moment, fear clawed at me. But then I remembered everything. The hospital bed, the forged papers, the way Ethan had clung to me, and I straightened. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You'll never come back. Not to me. Not to Ethan. You don't exist to us anymore." I walked past him, every step trembling but firm. And for the first time, he didn't follow. That night, I sat on the balcony while Ethan slept, staring at the city lights. The war was over, but revenge. Revenge had given me something I hadn't expected. Not just freedom, strength. I hadn't just survived them. I had beaten them at their own game, and I knew, deep in my bones, they would never hurt me, or my son, again. Because I wasn't their victim anymore. I was their reckoning.